Good afternoon. Well, this episode of Safety Culture Solutions brought to you by Safety Culture Strategies. I'm Mike Kinney, your host. Each week we talk to leaders, people, the grassroots, people having to implement a lot of this attributes of positive safety culture. And as we talked before, there's so many facets of it. It's always fascinating to me what we learn as we go through it. All the shows are at my company website, scstrat.com. We have a jukebox there so you can view those as well, in addition to YouTube and Facebook. This week, we are so thrilled to have Mr. Bill Flynn with us. He is the CEO and Chief Catalyst for Catalyst Growth Advisors. He's worked for and advised hundreds of companies where he has a long track record of success spanning multiple industries. Bill has collaborated with Alan Mulally. He was the former CEO of Boeing Commercial Aircraft and Ford Motor Company. Now, he's kind of a player. Pitched Steve Jobs, you may have heard of that guy. Accomplished much, failed often, and learned many useful lessons from over 30 years of studying the science of success. As a coach, in addition to being connected with MG100, Women's Business Collaborative, Mass MEP, Small Giants, and E for All, Bill's earned certifications from Scaling Up, Gradabaris Impact, Metronome United, Predictive Index, and the Neural Leadership Institute. Bill's best-selling book, Further, Faster, The Vital Few Steps That Take the Guesswork Out of Growth, continues to garner a near 5-star rating, generating demand for virtual and in-person national and international speaking opportunities. He is best described as a pragmatic Simon Sinek with an optimist and an operator. He figures out how to get stuff done. Away from his coaching, Bill is a father, learner, cultivator, entrepreneur, speaker, writer, athlete, brother, giver, musician, and friend. When he's not cheering on his collegiate champion, musically gifted daughter, Bill lives and works in Greater Boston. Mr. Flynn, welcome to the show today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So we're going to kind of jump into it. When you go to Bill's website, one of the things that struck me, because we're going to talk about safety culture as well, obviously, it's kind of the name of the show, is that you have a series of bullets that I believe some leaders, when they look at them, they might feel a little pinched, because you kind of point out what they do wrong, and there's quite a few things that really aren't being done as well as they could. Example, how they do vision, how they address change. And so much of it, what resonates with me, Bill, is there's just not a whole bunch of synergy to it, or at least that's how it can come across to people at the task level or the workers who turn the wrenches for a living.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think one of the things I've found, I've been sort of looking at business and why it fails, why it succeeds, but mostly why it succeeds. And there are a few things that people like Alan Mulally do really well. But I think one of the reasons it fails, or at least my theory is that we don't do those things completely wrong. We just do them a little bit wrong, and then they add up. So this phrase I like, which is tiny errors compound. So over time, these things just sort of drag on us as leaders and as companies, and that's what slows us down, and why most businesses fail or struggle. I would say, somewhere between 70 and 90% of businesses fail or struggle in the first 5 years.
Wow. And that's a significant number. You think about the businesses we have around. One of the quotes I found on your website was from Ashley Goodall. Feedback, I got to do it verbatim. Feedback is often me talking about me in the presence of you. I went, wow.
Yeah, and that's a great quote.
Yeah, and how many times have we all experienced that? Raise your hand. It's just, and at the end of the discussion and the feedback, quote unquote, and they're going, I don't think they really care about me. It was all about what their achievements are. So where have you seen that feedback with a little bit of assistance from valued organizations like yourselves to where, in fact, they can start actually providing value and hopefully achieving that ultimate goal of supporting a positive safety culture?
Sure. Well, there's a follow-up quote from Ashley, which I love, which is that advice is feedback in better clothes, which is a good one. But, and this kind of gets to the premise of the show, is feedback actually creates an unsafe culture, because feedback is very often corrective and it's very often not useful to the person that's getting it. I hear a lot, and there's these books out there that say you must give feedback and we have to have radical candor and all this kind of stuff. And I've come to believe that you don't have to have it. It's feedback is one tool of many. For skill development, it's probably vital because someone doesn't know how to do something, some sort of skill, and you need to give them feedback, right? You need to move that a little bit this way or turn that way or try this technique next time. That's certainly good feedback. But most of the time, it's not. It's behavioral development, and what I've found is that if you set a standard for really important things in the business, like strategy, like how to run a meeting or how to do change, how to make decisions, you really don't have to give a lot of feedback because what you can do is say, and this may have happened to you, Mike, or maybe you've done it to someone inadvertently, is let's say we're in a meeting and I'm running the meeting and you're my boss, and the meeting ends and you sort of tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, Bill, can you follow me back to my office? I got a few things I want to talk to you about this meeting. What do you think happens to me?
A little bit of panic.
Exactly, right? It's like, oh my God, what did I do wrong?
Yeah, usually you're not getting a thumbs up out of that.
Exactly, right? Those are what do they say? The 5 or 6 most feared words in business is, "Can I give you some feedback?" That's actually, that's sort of like when your wife or your girlfriend or whatever says, we need to talk. That's it's a horrible phrase.
Yes.
So let's say we're in this meeting, right? And we go back to your office. So I'm following you back to your office. And what's going on in my brain is it's catastrophizing, right? It's saying, oh my God, what's going to happen? I look bad in front of my peers. Am I going to get fired? If I get fired, I'm not going to be able to send the kids to school. We're going to go on the vacation. So by the time I sit down in front of you in your office, which is a status symbol,
Right.
when you sit behind your desk, which is another status symbol, I am not listening to you at all.
At all.
Not at all. My brain is in fear mode, right?
Yes.
Threat mode. So what you could have done differently is you could have said, hey, you could have sat next to me in the meeting and said, hey, Bill, that was a pretty good meeting, but how do you think it went? And I would give you my feedback and I would give you sort of my input. And hopefully if I'm not delusional, I might say, oh, well, it didn't go quite as well. And, he said, what, I think you could say, hey, Bill, as you know, one of our principles at our business, one of our values is Kaizen, continuous improvement. We want to get better and better and better at what we do. So we want to get better and better at running meetings. So why don't we do this? Why don't you put like a coffee or lunch on my schedule, and we're going to meet before the next meeting. And what I'd like you to do for that meeting is bring 3 things that you thought went really well during this. And then I want you to bring 1 or 2 things that you think could have gone better. I'll do the same thing. And then we're going to keep meeting until you and I both decide that this meeting is run as well as it possibly can be run. That's a completely different way of doing this. And I didn't give you any feedback, right? And I didn't put you in any threat mode. There's no status symbol with my office. There's certainty for you. There's autonomy. You have control over it. There's so many things you could have done differently and get the same outcome. Actually, probably a better outcome.
Probably a better outcome. Yes. And in that scenario, the other people at your level in the meeting, as you walk out with the boss, you're going, man, I'm glad I'm not going in the office. Right? Exactly. So they avoid eye contact with Bill because they don't want to be related at all to any blowback that's going to occur.
Exactly. And actually you bring up a really good point, Mike, which is that's another threat mode, is that you're seen in in the social setting, you're now in the out group.
Yes.
Right. And we as tribal beings don't like to be in the out group because the out group means possible and likely death. Because we're going to have to, that's the way our brain sees it. Our brain sees being in the out group as death because our brain does not do a very good job of distinguishing between a social threat and a physical threat. It is 10 to 50,000 years old sitting in there. It still thinks we're on the savannah. It's not acting in your best interest here in the modern world.
Exactly. And I've had the pleasure of working with lots of companies, and we'll talk about adult learning, and they'll have me in some of their sessions. And I've had instructors with the best intentions. They walk through, and there's 15, 20 people there. He said, raise your hand if you don't understand what we just talked about. I went, ooh. So I'm sitting beside Bill Flynn, who's really good, and you're also my boss. I'm looking at you, right? And you don't raise your hand. Odds are I'm not going to raise my hand because I don't want to look bad.
Yeah, don't want to look bad, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, even if your boss isn't sitting there, we don't want to look bad in front of even strangers.
Yeah, total strangers, right? Oh, and then,
Right.
then you get the peer thing going on. Oh, geez, guess what? Mike Kinney didn't figure out what that was, even though they really didn't know either. So then there's that little bit of snickering, and it gets kind of a challenge. So from a positive safety, before we step away on meetings, and the old phrase, you have a meeting to plan your next meetings. It's interesting how so many of those, and you do a great job on your website articulating this, that if they're not careful, the meeting just becomes pretty much a status session, right? Versus
Yes.
what do we really, we're taking up all this time of the CEO, the list goes on, the C-suite. What's the executive decisions that need to be made versus, and essentially, okay, everybody showed up for work.
Yep. Yeah, I used to when I was a GM, I ran our senior staff meeting, and we'd have Monday at 10 o'clock. And what I did is I asked my team, I said, okay, by Friday at 5 p.m., we all have to do our status reports. You have to send them to everyone, and I expect everyone to read everyone else's status reports. And if you have any questions, your job is to bring them to the meeting. And so the first time I did this, we sort of went around, and someone said, I'll start. And he starts reading his status report. And I'm kind of a son of a teaser, if you will. Mm-hmm. So I turned to him and said, Rob, do you think I don't know how to read? And he looks at me like, what do you mean? I said, I read your report. I said, if there's something that you want to highlight and elaborate on that you think is going to affect other people, absolutely, let's talk about it. And by the way, everyone else should have read your report. And if they didn't, that's their problem.
Correct.
They'll read it next time. Because if something happens and they didn't read your report and they're surprised, then it's on them, not on you, because you wrote it in your report. After that, we never read our reports again. We actually got stuff done in the meeting.
Yeah.
We got stuff done.
Excellent. From a safety culture perspective, if there's one critical skill that any leader should have in their quiver, if you will, have you got some examples of what that could be to help them truly have that trajectory for that positive safety culture?
Well, so what is a leader, right? And there's a 15 or 16 or $20 billion industry called leadership. And I'm going to say something really controversial. I don't actually think leadership is a thing. There's no real set of standards and things that we could say, this is what makes a great leader. Because, Steve Jobs could be considered a great leader. And he wasn't really a super nice guy. He didn't have a lot of integrity. You have Bill Gates wasn't really humble. Was kind of a jerk to his team. So, and we say, oh, you have to have integrity, you have to have charisma, and like Warren Buffett has no charisma whatsoever. Really, so what are the attributes? So I think there are only two things that really matter to be a leader.
Okay.
One is if you want to be a leader, then you have to have people who follow you. That is, to me, the one main definition. All leaders that have the same have followers. Whether we think they're a good leader or not doesn't matter. If they have followers, they're a leader of some kind, right? We can all disagree. Some people thought Donald Trump was a tremendous leader. Mm-hmm. Some people also thought he was the worst leader in the world. Who's right? I don't know. I'm certainly have an opinion, but he was a leader because he had people follow him. So in order to have people follow you, you have to tell them, where are we going? Because they want to know. So I think vision is the most important thing you have to have as a leader. You have to have a vision. You have to articulate it in very clear and specific words. You have to paint a picture as if it's already finished. And the people can say, yes, Mike, I want to go there with you. I choose to follow you. You cannot proclaim ever that you're a leader. That's not how it works. People choose you as their leader. You can be an authority or a boss or whatever, but you're not a leader unless you have followers. And you can certainly have coerced followers, but that doesn't usually last.
Sooner or later, they're going to bail.
Exactly, of course. And I think the other attribute that I believe goes through every leader is courage. Yes. You have to have courage because you're asking people to follow you. You're probably painting something that's not been done yet, and people are going to tell you it's wrong, and it doesn't work, and you're not going to get there. You have to have the courage to give to the people the ability to help you, which is giving autonomy, which is giving all these things that allow them to help you get there. Because if you are like Jim Collins, the genius with 1,000 helpers,
yes.
then that's going to be hard, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of businesses fail, is that we think we have to pull people along with us, and they should really be pushing as we're pulling. And that's what makes things, that's what gives velocity to business, I think.
Yeah, that's a great, as a brief example, we're going to do a commercial break. I was helping a company and they shared warehouse space with another company, and somebody would not store the ladders properly. And so the team I was with, the equivalent of the president, looked at the safety guy and says, I want you to make sure that we never see those ladders in there stored inappropriately. And you just call this look of bafflement, but there was an edict because they had no control what the other company did, versus, hey guys, let's see who could we meet with the other company. Maybe our safety people can help them understand their criteria. Well, the manager didn't have time for that. Just give out the edict. Don't go away. Brief commercial break. We're going to be right back, and we are just getting started. Mr. Bill Flynn, stand by.
Safety Culture Strategies provides world-class safety culture and safety program management consultative services for clients throughout the United States. Whether your company is pursuing Voluntary Protection Program STAR designation, ISO 45001 certification, or considering a comprehensive review of your current safety programs and processes, Safety Culture Strategies brings hands-on experience combined with a unique perspective that readily translates from senior management to task-level personnel. This collective skill set provides you with a very insightful health check of your overall safety management system that can also assist with reducing injuries and attrition, as well as increasing profitability. Safety Culture Strategies is also certified to provide Ziegler Institute employee engagement training and leadership coaching. When combined with established relationships with federal and state regulators, Safety Culture Strategies is uniquely positioned to assist the safety culture efforts of any company. For additional information, visit www.scstrat.com or call us at 702-780-1410. After all, every company has a safety culture, but is it the culture you want?
And figuring out what that culture is that you truly want. Everybody says, well, I want a really good one. Well, what does good look like? Well, Bill Flynn and his team, I think, can definitely help answer that question. So kind of do a little segue here. I think I've talked before that, it's a lot of this is kind of like art, you know it's good when you see it. So from your time, and you've been at this a long time and lots of experience with many organizations, what's a few attributes that is visible of a positive safety culture? What would that look like?
So I'm a huge fan of Amy Edmondson, and she talks a lot about psychological safety. And it's funny, I'm rereading one of her books, The Fearless Organization, and there's a terrific example in there, I think, which illustrates this. There's it was a mine in South Africa called Anglo American. It's in her book. And this newly appointed CEO, her name is Cynthia Carroll, was brought in I think 2008 or somewhere around there, or 2011, I can't remember, but about 10 years ago, give or take. And she came in and boldly said, we're going to have a zero fatality goal, right? And she met tremendous operations. She said, this mine that we're in it's fraught with danger, and we just have to accept the fact that some people are going to die, and you're crazy. And she didn't back away from that. Well, what she did is she had the humility to go to the workers in the mine and others, and she spoke to them and said, tell me about your experience in the mine, and when do you feel safe, when do you not feel safe, what ideas do you have to make it safer, etc. And in 2011, she reduced the number of fatalities from 44 in 2006 to 17. So it's about a 60 some odd percent. But while doing that as well, because she was told, well, then, if you're going to do this, it's going to be expensive. That means, we're going to lose profits. She achieved the highest operating profits in the history of the organization. Mm-hmm. And the share price also rose. So she found that, you can transform old attitudes about things. And if you involve everyone in the process, all the key stakeholders, you'll always have a better outcome if you're open to it, if you're humble, if you're open to learning, if you're open to challenging the status quo. Those are the three attributes that I always look for when I look for my clients. And I think those are great attributes that that any leader should have to create what you would call a safety culture.
Well, excellent example. And I'm as old school as I can. Is when people say, oh, X amount of people are going to die, I kind of get a little extra twitchy, and I get more forceful nudging, you will, some conversation, because then you get the impact on morale of all the other people that were associated either directly or indirectly with that individual, and due to the fatality, and it's can be a downward spiral for the company. One of the things I found, because I keep going back to all the cool stuff you got on your website, one of your bullets, it says, we do people wrong. Can you kind of explain a little further? Yeah, well, what's that one about? That one's kind of really intriguing.
Yeah, well, people are crazy, Mike. we're crazy. We're irrational. We're impulsive. We have a brain that is working against us. As I mentioned earlier, the last major upgrade to our brain was between 10 and 50,000 years ago, according to at least the latest neuroscience. And so it is fooling us on a regular basis. We found that when the brain makes decisions, the limbic areas of the brain, the sort of the older part of the brain that's been around for hundreds of thousands, if not longer, is what lights up first. The blood goes there first. So we make our decisions on an emotional basis first, and then we make up reasons after the fact. So it happens all the time. Yet, we convince ourselves that this is exactly what we want to do, but it's not. It's just not the way the brain works. There's a great metaphor by this guy Jonathan Haidt, who's an evolutionary psychologist, and he works at Stern School of Business. And his metaphor is that our brain is basically an elephant and a rider, and the elephant is the old part of our brain. And when the elephant wants something, there's nothing the rider can do to stop it, right? So if you're trying to lose weight or whatever, and you have a big cake that's sitting in the middle of the kitchen table, you could probably resist it for 15 to 20 minutes, but that regulator in your brain is being overridden by the elephant saying, I need the calories, because again, it's 10 to 50,000 years old, and calories were at a premium a long time ago. That's no longer true. We can get calories anywhere, and we get too many of them, actually, right? So very likely you're going to have a piece of that cake. There's very little that you can do. And then what will happen is the rider will then say, well, you know what? I'll just exercise a little more, or I'll eat less tomorrow. And it rationalizes behavior. And we do this all the time. So that's what I mean by we do people wrong. We think people are rational beings. We are not. You have to understand that we are irrational. However, we are predictably irrational. And if you understand that, if you understand where people come from, then you can have a better chance of working with them and helping them to be the best version of themselves.
Fascinating. So as we get in a little bit more of the analysis side of this, because some of this work you guys do, I just sit back and go, wow, it's well on target. So from what you've seen, experience, is it possible to actually measure the differences in positive safety culture from different initiatives or processes that have been going to determine, in fact, are some of these techniques and stuff actually making a difference?
Yeah, and I think we had a little bit of a measurement thing with the example with the Anglo-American mime, Cynthia Carroll. Mm-hmm. But there are 2 or 3 sort of measurements out there. There's the ENPS, which you can, which I think all of us have seen it as an NPS, which is how likely are you to recommend this product, service, whatever, to a friend. Yes. I'm sure we've all answered that between 1 or 0 and 10 or whatever it is, at least once in our lives, if not many, many, many times. There's a version of it called employee NPS, which is how likely are you to recommend someone to work here. It's sort of along the same lines. That's one thing. You can measure it that way. Marcus Buckingham has some good stuff. I know Gallup has some good stuff where you basically can ask people, are we the right kind? Are we a team culture, right? His is the best of me and the best of we. I've got that as on my website as well as one of the blog posts I have. You can just type in Marcus Buckingham, Bill Flynn, and best of me, best of we, and it'll come up. It's a really short blog post, but it goes through 8 questions, which I don't remember off the top of my head. And you can send that out to your entire team and really get a measurement. How do people feel? How do the people feel about themselves as a team? How do they feel as an employee or a member of the organization? I like those objective. I mean, it's not completely objective, but it's close to objective measurement as you can get. And what you do is at least it gives you a benchmark, and then you can go from there. And I have had my clients do this, And I'll tell you, I have one woman, I just think she's tremendous. She's so wonderful. She's nurturing. She's a lovely human being, and her team loves her. But when she gave them this overview, she was not graded very well.
Oh no.
And it wasn't because she wasn't nice. She was just moving too fast for everybody. She's kind of running over everybody. And people were, like scared. Like, you got to slow down. You got to let me catch up.
Yes.
So it's not always something you want to read, but it's important to read it.
That's right on target. And that definitely resonates with me, because you give me a big giant whiteboard and a couple of dry markers to look at how to solve something. And essentially, then I got the energy of an Irish setter with the attention span of a gerbil, and I'm all over the place. Right? And so about 30 minutes into it, I says, everybody knows where we're going, right? And then I realized there's a whole bunch like those deer in the headlights, kind of looking at them.
Yeah,
going, oh, because I'm thinking 2-3 months already, and they're thinking maybe, okay, what do we want to do before lunch? So be able to moderate some of that so they can remain engaged. Otherwise, it's kind of like, what? I don't want to be around that guy.
Yeah,
again.
one thing I learned through my work in the Neuro Leadership Institute is if you do that, the way to keep them engaged is to give them context first and say, hey, what we're trying to accomplish is this. And because what's happening is if they don't know that, they're watching you, they're not even paying attention to you. They're still trying to figure out, what is he doing? Why are we doing it? And what are we supposed to be accomplishing? So they're not only are they not understanding what you wrote on the board, they're not even following what you wrote on the board.
Yes.
Right? Whenever I give a speech, the first thing I do with every speech is I say, here's what I'm hoping will happen. And I describe in a sentence or two. And then I say, if you were to accomplish that, if I were to help you accomplish that, what would it mean to you? Because meaning is really important to human beings. And I wait a minute and I say, write that down in front of you. So type it into your phone or write it down on a piece of paper, whatever it is, and keep it in front of you so it reminds you of why, what this means to you. Because if they can tie it to what it means to them, they're much more likely to be engaged. And we as leaders don't do that enough. It's called WIFM, right? What's in it for me?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you do that at the beginning, you're much more likely to not lose them, half an hour in or even 5 minutes in.
Or even 5 minutes in. Of course, then you got the other camp, NIMBYs, right? Not in my backyard, right? So they'll just kind of mentally draw a line in the sand. Well, before we get out of here and we're getting towards the end of the show, I mentioned to Rick, the producer, here in studio, I says, we got Bill Flynn coming in. He goes, really? And because we're probably going to have to bring you back because we have I don't think we even scratched the surface of these great discussion topics and what you guys bring to the dance. So real quick, because that's always a fun one. When you look back on your career, who would you view as a mentor or somebody who was really influential that helped you kind of aim the trajectory to where you're at now?
Oh, so my answer to this is always the same, guys. It's Alan Mulally. You mentioned earlier. I've been speaking about Alan Mulally for years, and most people don't know who he is. And so a quick story on Alan Mulally. Alan Mulally, to me, is the best leader we've ever had, at least in my generation, if not at least 100 years or more. At least in management science, been around for 100 years. Why? Is because Alan Mulally was the CEO of Boeing Commercial Aircraft through 9/11, and he was the CEO of Ford Motor Company through 2008. And both times he had struggling or dying companies that that went into an existential economic crisis for that particular industry, and took them out of it, and they were better off when they left the crisis than when they went in.
Wow.
No leader that has ever done that twice. And also what I like about him is he's a really nice guy. And how do I know he's a really nice guy, really humble guy? Because I wrote an article about this story. It was in a book called American Icon. I wrote about 3 years ago. And it's just a short little, 3-minute read. And I tied it to, hey, this is how I work with my clients. And guess what? It's exactly what Alan Mulally did twice. So if he's doing it and he did it with these huge companies, it's probably a good idea. And he read the article, Mike. And he called me up and said, I want to talk to you. And I am now friends. The reason I'm an MG 100 is because Alan Mulally, Marshall Goldsmith, and Frances Hesselbein, the Girl Scout lady, started this organization about 4 or 5 years ago. And he nominated me to be in the organization. I'm in the organization because I met Alan Mulally. So you can be a really good leader and do really almost impossible things and still be a nice human being.
Very, very cool. But we're getting ready to be done. Before we do that, you finished speaking at one of the big national conferences, leaders in the room, the safety practitioners, hats and horns are in there. They're chanting your name. Somebody's going to buy you drinks for the next 6 months. As you go to leave the stage, what's 2 or 3 things you really hope they write down and they take back to their companies to improve their safety culture?
Absolutely. So it's in my book. It's called Further Faster, Take the Guesswork Out of Growth, which I think you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
And it's 3 things. One is performance is a team sport.
Cool.
You need to understand how to assemble, how to grow, and how to manage teams, lead teams. They do most of the work, yet we don't teach people how to be team leaders. True. There's great work out there. There's Amy Edmondson, there's Marcus Buckingham, the whole bunch. Simon Sinek talks about teams all the time. General Stanley McChrystal has a book called The Team of Teams, and he talks about his experience in JSOC. That's the first thing. Performance is a team sport. Second is that your business is one big system made up of multiple subsystems. The 2 primary systems in your business are strategy and execution. You have to remember those 2 things are inexorably and inextricably connected. They are not 2 separate things. They are 2 sides of the same coin. What do you execute? You execute on your strategy. Yes. And when you execute on your strategy, you find what's wrong and you fix it. And you get better and better and better at it. And the last thing is, if you want to grow your company, cash should be your only and primary financial growth metric. Why? Because it costs money to grow. Growth sucks cash, and you have to spend the money in front of the growth. So what I do with my clients is we do a 3-year plan, and then we say, how much will that cost? And we say, okay, now what do we need to do as an organization? How much do we have to sell, what profit, et cetera, to make the money so we can actually execute on the plan? Wow. So those 3 things: performance is a team sport, strategy and execution are a main subsystem of your overall system.
Correct.
And then lastly, cash is your primary financial growth metric.
I absolutely love it. So Bill, before we sign off and say goodbye, how do people get a hold of you?
Sure. The best way to get me is at my website, which is catalystgrowthadvisors.com. Okay. My phone number's on there, calendar, my book. You can download my book for free from that site. There's 130 blog posts on there that you can do, which are all short 1 to 2 minute reads. You can sign up for them there. There's lots of stuff there.
Excellent. Well, Bill, thank you so much for being on the show today. And ladies and gentlemen, this concludes this week's episode of Safety Culture Solutions, brought to you by Safety Culture Strategies. And every once in a while, I'll get that email or text says, Mike, how can we get a hold of you? Thanks for asking. You can check me out on my website, www.fcstrat.com. Give me a call at the office, 702-780-1410, or my email, really easy, mike@fcstrat.com. Until next time, thank you very much for being with us. Have a great weekend, and never forget to reinforce to everybody in your organization how important they are to your safety culture journey. Till next time, bye-bye.